I'm super excited to announce our next peer advocacy talk. These conversations between either two folks from one organization or from two organizations. So excited to introduce Hedi and Helen Sarakinos to you all today. Hedi is the director of South Madison programs at Rooted. Hedi's a longtime resident, organizer, active citizen, and photographer in the Madison area, and has been an active member of Community Shares of Wisconsin board for the past 4 years. Her experience with racial justice work in Madison brings so much to the work of Community Shares and to her community-centered work at Badger Rock and South Madison programs. And I'm so excited to have her here today. Hedi's also one of the first people who sort of brought me into the Madison community, and I really appreciate her for that. And then next up, we have Helen Sarakinos, who has served as the executive director of REAP Food Group since 2017. Under her leadership, the work at REAP has continued to expand and transform, most recently in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are grateful to have Helen on the Big Share Live today as she wraps up her time in the next month or so at REAP and leaves us with her insights and approach to her understanding of food systems and what we need to have healthy and strong communities. Both Hedi and Helen are so well-versed in the needs of our community as a whole, and specifically when it comes to food justice and so much more. And I, for one, am so excited to hear their conversation around their work in food justice in this community. So without further ado, take it away, Hedi and Helen.
All right, thank you. We thought Bria would be here with us, but we're glad to know she's in Atlanta enjoying better weather, but ours is getting good, so. Yeah. So I guess I'm here with Helen. I guess I'll just once again introduce myself. I'm Hedi Rudd. I'm the director of Badger Rock Neighborhood Center, but I'm also the deputy director of South Madison programming for Rooted. Rooted is an organization that's made up of two organizations, Center for Resilient Cities, which is where I started, and Community Groundworks, which a lot of people may know as Troy Farm in North Madison. And we recently merged in 2019, the end of 2019, and merged those two organizations. So basically what we do is we provide, our mission is collaborations based in food, land, and learning. So you'll see us, out on the farm growing food. You'll see us in the kids' garden teaching kids how to work in the land. And you'll see us located in schools, doing education in schools, amongst a number of other things, and I'm sure we'll get to that. So if, Helen, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, Sure. And I guess we're going to just have a conversation about the work that we do. I want to hear more about your work as well.
Wonderful, and likewise, I'm Helen Sarakinos, the Executive Director of REAP Food Group, and REAP is an organization that's been around southern Wisconsin now, I want to say roughly 23 years. We're getting close to the quarter century. Founded on an important idea that, we are, Wisconsin particularly, southern Wisconsin, we are embedded in some of the richest and most productive farmland in the country. And it's an important tie for us culturally. It's an important tie economically, environmentally. And yet, we still struggle to have the ability to bring food that's grown within 10 miles of Madison to Madison plates. And so the mission has evolved over the years because we really believe that actually building out that sustainable and just food system, it can transform communities, economies, and lives. So our programming sort of straddles a lot of the food system work, right from trying to help farmers get food into mostly institutional buyers. So we've worked a lot with the school district. That has been our most longstanding project, working with Madison Metropolitan School District on farm-to-school programming. We've also worked to build those bridges to hospitals, continue to emphasize, or rather create the technical assistance to get food into institutions and anchor institutions that serve everybody in the community. And that sort of undergirds the other part of our programming, which is really to ensure that everyone has access to fresh and healthy and sustainably grown food. And that's some of the programming we do with community partners. That's some of our educational programming and farm to school and summer programming, which we can get into. And it's certainly, we've seen those two important pieces really come together, those two needs, I should say, in a very real way during COVID. And if anything, it has really solidified for us how important it is to build this food system locally, not only for crisis, but that it's needed to strengthen our sense of community.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So the way I think about you guys now, REAP now, is we had just merged the end of 2020. COVID hit, and we had all these plans of things that we were going to do as an organization. COVID hit and shut everything down. Our building, our neighborhood center was closed, and everyone went home. But then we're at home and we're thinking, what are we going to do? Because we can't stop. Unfortunately for us, the work that we do is primarily outdoors. So at Badger Rock, we have the Badger Rock Urban Farm, so we were able to do work outside. Troy Farm, we were able to increase production by 40% so that we were able to get food to the community. And then you guys called us and said, hey, we've got to get food to the Latinx population, and can you help us? And so we were able to provide space to you to do that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that program and how that came together?
Yeah. That's a really special program, and a really beautiful way that emphasizes, honestly, our communities, especially our communities of color, our communities who are underserved in Madison and Dane County, knew exactly what they needed and kind of could tell you how they needed it to happen, and we were a partner that was able to find ways to connect what was needed to make an important service happen for them. So we have our partners, which is Roots for Change. They are community health workers. It's a cooperative of Latina and Indigenous community health workers that we have been partnering on numerous wellness and food initiatives over the last 2 years. And this was a really interesting moment where when COVID shut down schools that second week of March, we were in the midst of having purchased a whole bunch of root vegetables that were going to be served as snacks in the school. And I was telling them we were all of a sudden sitting on 600 pounds of beets and other root vegetables. And one of the promotoras says, it's just such a shame, because I know there are families whose family members have lost jobs, their kids are not getting food in school, they could really use that food. And then they just sort of looked at us and said, can we get it to them? Can we get a few more things? Yeah. Can we do something with this? And we were like, well, yeah, we can aggregate, we can maybe work with some farmers, figure out a system to pack it all together, and then we've got to talk about distribution. And they said, great, we need this done by next week. Can we think about starting this next week? And it was one of those moments where we were so out of our comfort zone with how we like to do things, but that's what a crisis is. You have to respond, and you can't do it with business as usual. So, Roots for Change was so embedded in the community, and they saw that immediate need around food. We were able to, and then we reached out, because one of the first things we knew right away was going to be a problem is it is not easy to even find a place to receive produce, receive food, keep it cooled, separate it into smaller bags and send it out. That already was a huge barrier. And so we reached out to Badger Rock and Rooted, and they said, yes, immediately, of course, we'll figure out how to make it all work. And it was an amazing answer. Yeah. And so that was like the first logistical barrier that went down.
Yeah.
And then I think from there we were even talking about how do we get some of Troy Gardens' food in these boxes, right? And how do we get some of these food out to families that Rooted and Badger Rock were serving? Yeah,
so at the same time, while you had your food distribution going on, we also served as a hub for MMSD to do their food distribution, which they were doing directly in neighborhoods. And then we had Badger Rock Neighborhood Center food distribution, because we also had produce that we were growing that the students at Badger Rock Middle School had planted and were never able to harvest. And so we were able to get that food into the community. We were able to add to that through our partnerships with CAC and Second Harvest. And then at some point, we thought, hey, it's outside, let's bring some kids back. And so we were able to start a youth employment program, which started, I believe, with 6 and eventually increased to 12 youth that were former Badger Rock Middle School students primarily, but there were others as well that were able to come back during COVID to work in the farm and harvest and get food out to the community, as well as helping to teach garden instruction to current Badger Rock Middle School students. So, and then at the same time that that's happening, we were also seeing that, like I said, production increase on the farm on the north side at Troy Farm. And so we were able to move some dollars around so that we could take that increased produce production and get that into the hands of community members at no cost. So, somehow, by hook or by crook, we were able to get the food out, get it into the community, and respond to that need. But it was great to have that time to see each other and to work with your team during that time.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. It really grew relationships. It was beautiful to get to go there. And, not only are we working on these resilience boxes, but you could sort of look out the window and see the garden coming along and people out there and coming together around food. This pandemic, so much of it focused for groups like ours around food, around making sure people had enough of it, as using it as an outlet, a healthy place to come together safely, a way to sort of strengthen your, cultural context that you're around. It was just such a powerful, centralizer, and I feel like we came out of that time with a stronger commitment to each other as groups.
Yeah.
And I think for REAP and Rooted too, in addition, we started talking about, touching on some of the underlying issues that made this response harder than it should be.
Yeah.
And so we continue to have those conversations about how do we work together to tackle some of the policy improvements that are at the root of making this easier, that the next time a crisis hits, which we can be certain there will be other crises, whether they're pandemics or climate or economic, we need to be better prepared as a community. And that's a conversation that I know as 2 organizations, we've partnered together to apply for funding to try to work on this, as well as many others in the community, whether it's Extension or the city and the county, other nonprofit organizations and community centers. It's something that I think both our organizations feel really passionate that we need to continue ride this awareness now to look for systemic change going into the future.
Yeah, that's been a large part of our work during our merger. In the early days, our staff took part in training through the YWCA racial justice training. We've worked with Equity by Design to create an equity framework for our organization. But what I find is, doing that work is internal work. Taking it outside, to me what that looks like is really allowing the people in the community to tell their story. It's not my job to tell another person's story. And so I love it when, for example, one of our pandemic responses was to take classes that had traditionally been held in person to take them virtually. So people may recognize now our farm manager, who typically would have been in the garden, with a sun hat on, dripping in sweat. Now she's a video star and stars on our Facebook page, as well as our other staff and community members. And so what we try to do is bring in community members who can share their stories and their foodways with the community. On the Troy Farm side, we also have a training program where we train people who are interested in becoming farmers. And that we'd like to see more community people get involved in, more young people, because, you know, if you're watching the news lately, you hear that Wisconsin, in Wisconsin, the state known for farming, that, you know, we're losing farms, we're losing farmers. And, you know, in my mind, I think, wow, we could help change that. We could help. I know you know, that there are people who want access to farmland.
Right.
And how do we get them access to that farmland so that they too can grow? And how do we start that conversation? I think that's really important. But first you have to get people interested in the idea. And we know that with that, there are some things that need to be tackled, like the loss of land for certain individuals, healing that needs to happen around land, and the trauma related to land. We can't not have those conversations. And so we feel that those are important conversations to be had, and we want to be able to help have them, but to also try to find the bright spots too, especially because we're working with a younger population, but by and large. So
are the people you're training at Troy, I get to ask you a question now? The farmer trainings that you're doing, are that you said there's a lot of younger people. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Who is finding these classes?
Yeah.
Who's showing up? How are you getting young people to show up?
Yeah, it's surprising. I think in the past you would think, you know, traditional ways like work study through the university, which we love to have that population come. But we have a relationship with the VA, so we have some veterans that have come through that are able to work on the land and get compensation through the VA programming, and to learn more about farmer training. But we've also had people who have no connection to the university who are interested in farming. We've put the call out amongst other partners to say, hey, if you know people who are interested in farming, you know, have them come and join this programming. What we'd like to be able to do is to raise more funds so that we can pay those people a living wage. By and large, you know, those, especially if you're doing work study, there's only so much that you can make those dollars stretch. But to be able to have access to dollars that we can use to get people into farming and pay them a family sustaining wage would be a blessing. I think not only to us as an organization or to those individuals, but to the community. We're in Wisconsin, once again, and farming needs to be something that we put some priority on, and not have it be exclusive to people who have traditionally been seen in farming, but to those people who, honestly, we owe a great deal to as it relates to farming in terms of knowledge and practices. So I definitely would like to see that.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a real need. I mean, from the agricultural supply chain end of things, when you're talking about a local food system here, you know, we don't have enough people who know the business of making food. So not only growing it and not only access to land, but even then, how do you processing meats so that people can buy them, so that they pass food safety standards and you can sell them to people who want to buy locally. We just don't have either the facilities or the trained staff to do that. Those are huge needs, and those are trades and skills that, you know, you have to invest in to develop that workforce. I mean, and then it goes on, like we said, to the infrastructure, right? It's expensive. These are the sorts of projects we see as really high priority to provide an inroad for smaller and beginning growers and growers who don't come in deeply resourced. If they want to start being able to sell their produce to different markets, not just the farmer's market, not direct to consumer, but if you're trying to find a viable market route that's not just directly person to person, you need to have access to these spaces in an affordable way. So lots of small farmers can come together and aggregate and sell to the schools or sell to a hospital or sell hopefully and eventually to jails. Like, we want to see those supply chains get developed, but they're not there right now. So that, I mean, from REAP's perspective, that's another big, huge gap that we're hoping to tackle head on, and again, use this opportunity of what we've just been through in the last 2 years to really remind people of why it's important, why it's like national security to be able to get food grown 10 miles away to people's plates in an affordable way. And so
the pandemic is almost, well, today the masks come off, although we'll still be wearing them, I'm sure, in many places. But, you know, I'm thinking about what the future, you know, holds. I'm thinking about this summer. I'm looking forward to community dinners coming back, both at Bedrock and at Troy Farm. You know, just seeing people return to the land and return to programming. I know we're hoping to take the work that we've done at Bedrock with youth employment and see that grow on the north side. You know, that's really important that youth have an opportunity to come out and enjoy what that work looks like and what it feels like, because it can be really fun. I know that we're also looking to ramp up, you know, what we're doing by ways of education with the school district and with Farm to ECE, which is an area that we, you know, all work in somewhat in different schools, so it doesn't necessarily overlap. But I know you guys also have some things that you're going to be doing in the high school realm, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, so the last 2 years since COVID hit, we're not in schools. You know, we've been out of the classrooms. We haven't had AmeriCorps service members. And in fact, it's been really scary time for us because so much of our identity as an organization has been around our farm to school education. At the same time, it was a necessary pause for us to sort of look deeply. So Hedi, you talked about your internal, you know, the evolution you've taken as an organization, the internal work, and we have that going on as well. We recognize who our faces are and who the community is are not necessarily the same.
Right.
Our work, our faces, our staff don't reflect the diversity of our community.
Right.
And that's been, you know, really top of mind for us. And that's a lot of our internal work. So both in how we are learning to be a partner and sort of decolonizing a little bit of how we partner and recognizing, for instance, in our Farms to Families initiative, the heart of that partnership was not REAP. It was Roots for Change.
Right.
They held the relationships. They held the ties to the community. Certainly we had a lot to bring to that partnership and a responsibility to do it. And we recognized the mutuality of helping small farmers and helping really vulnerable families in our community. But we didn't call the shots in how that should be done. And we're learning. I don't want to say we learned it because we're not done. We're learning to decentralize ourselves if we're truly going to be the allies we're aspiring to be, and eventually to be the organization that reflects the community. So that said, we both deeply valued being able to do this education in the schools with young K-5 students about food and farming, but also recognized there was something that was feeling a little uncomfortable about being a white-led organization in schools that had a lot of children of color, and talking about, you know, how to eat. What is good food? What is agriculture? Those are deep cultural constructs too. And so one of the things that COVID has allowed us is some space to figure out how we evolve from doing the teaching to helping bring resources to the future teachers. And so what that means in a sense is leadership development, support to groups who know what they want to do. And so some of the examples of what we're doing are, we were invited by Centro Hispanos Juventud program, which is their middle school Latino leadership program. They were really interested in the kids having an opportunity to learn about food. And I mean, that it is a commonality I've heard with everybody I've talked to. They care about wanting to promote healthy habits and eating well and appreciation for good food and the cultural value it brings, right? So we worked with Juventud, and we've done one pilot, hopefully a second one coming up in April, where we do a food justice class. And so what that has entailed is Jolie Beth from our staff had pulled together the first one, where she invited a small business that was Latino co-owned, Tortilleria Cepeta, in Lone Rock, and this is a really cool little micro business. It's a couple, and he's from Oaxaca, I believe. And Hedi, his wife, is actually from Lone Rock. But they've started a tortilla making business, but they use this really old process of nixtamalizing corn. And not only are they using this really old traditional process, but they're also growing heritage varieties of corn and using heritage breeds that are grown here for them in Wisconsin. So it's hyper-local business.
Yeah.
The corn is grown on the outskirts of town where they're making it. It's breeding these old varieties of corn that were used in this traditional process and creating an incredible product. And so everything about this is super cool about how they're building a business. They are, reintroducing for people who haven't tasted a traditional tortilla in many years, maybe since they were even kids. It's mind-blowing to them. They're like, this is what it tasted like at home, right?
Yeah.
So we brought them to come in and do a workshop with kids at Centro last November. And so it was two of the 4 middle schools that Juventud works with. And they got to make their own masa and their own tortillas, and they compared what it feels like to use a commercial masa with this like nixtamalized corn. And they all made the tortillas together. And then, the couple from La Tortilleria Zapeta talked about their business, talked about their dream of what they want to build. So these kids are getting this really interesting conversation that spans, industrialization of food production, bringing back traditional cultural foods, sustainability, and traditional heritage breeds of corn, building a business and how they're making it happen. And then on top of it, hands-on cooking, right? And at the end of it, they get to say, this is what I loved. This was not that interesting. I really found this cool. I want to see more of these things. And so we adapt. So the next class that we're going to do, we begin to let them sort of have some say and eventually co-create these programs. So this is part of our evolution away from top down.
Yep.
And so we can bring resources, we can reach out and organize, we can bring some capacity to this, but it really is eventually going to be in their hands what they want to learn about.
Yeah.
And so that kind of informs our programming there. And we're starting this summer, and this is actually our big share goal, is to launch, some of the funds we're raising today are going to help us to launch our pilot summer programming, which is going to be, in part, some of the work we've been known to do is go into parks with our food truck and do hands-on programming for kiddos. But part of it is going to be working at community centers, and hopefully we'll get to announce sort of publicly which ones we get to work with this summer in the coming weeks. But it's piloting a program aimed at teens again and building off of Juventud.
Nice.
So this idea of, food is at the center of politics and culture and sustainability, and helping to bring that in a really interesting and hands-on and relevant way to teens, with the idea that those of them who feel the fire of this work become the leaders and teach others going forward.
Yeah. I like what you said about, recognizing, that we are organizations that primarily are white-led, and that, we're not, we don't necessarily want to be taking space that's not our space. I thought that was a good opportunity to acknowledge the work of Urban Triage. I know they were here earlier today, that they're doing to increase capacity for this work, but for it to be led by the Black community. I think that's really important. So I'm impressed with that. To that end, I think we kind of see our role at Rooted as being there to be a resource for organizations like that. So that's one aspect of the work that we do. But also, thinking about the summer, last summer we were able to do a program called Rooted in Culture, which we worked with Yana Williams who does Dear Diary. And we're really thankful because she helped us to kind of lay the groundworks for what that could look like. A lot of that work also had been being done at Badger Rock with our farmer, Sirocconos, but now we're able to take that program and adapt it so that we can do that same programming this summer at Badger Rock, and also on the north side. Our kids garden staff have been working closely with Sirocconos to be able to introduce young people to their culture as it relates to urban agriculture, and not only introduce but learn from, right? Because these young people can tell you, what they're eating at home and what their traditions are, and so it's kind of a give and a take. It's a little bit of, let me show you how to do this, but you tell me what this means to you, and so we always kind of look at the way that we work in that regards. Definitely excited about just getting back to the land again, getting back to seeing people. I think if there's anything that is hurting me during this time, it is not seeing people on a regular basis. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to make those connections. When I think about the work in South Madison, I know my team has been really working hard to plan what the summer is going to look like, and they're so excited between, the Rooted in Culture programming, bringing youth back to the farm, having community dinners, increasing our capacity to interface with other organizations and provide education and, opportunities for families. One of the things I didn't mention was during, pre-COVID, we had, I think, 16 community garden spots at Badger Rock, and we increased that to 45. So that it became a place where families, and I'm sure if you were at Badger Rock, you saw some of that, but, a place where families could come and get outside and work in the gardens. So we're really excited about that. We lost, as some people may know, the school district is going to be building a new building on our site, so we're going to be welcoming 400 elementary school students to the Badger Rock land, and so we lost some land that Hmong growers had been growing on, but one of the other arms that we have is our Community Gardens Network, which manages many of the gardens around the Madison area, and so we were able to help relocate those individuals to another farm, and that we know is another, is just another piece of that land the need for there to be more land for people to access for growing. No matter what culture they're from, people need access to land and to grow.
Yeah, I love that you focus on that, and this is. Our organizations, the Venn diagrams can overlap, but they're such important. Together we offer a really important diversity of services and capacities, and the fact that you are focused on access to growing areas to grow and managing gardens and giving people plots of land to work on, it's a really big need, and we recognized over the years the work we're doing in that supply chain development and in being the middle person between growers and institutional buyers, when everybody on either end of that is so overwhelmed by what they're trying to do that we get to focus on all the problem solving to make it happen. Mm-hmm. These are really different pieces along the supply chain of a sustainable and just local food system. Like, you need them from beginning to end, and it's really exciting to know we have partners and organizations that are committed to this, to the vision, the holistic vision, and working on their parts of it. And it's part of what makes it so much fun and so inspiring in this community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exciting.